Right then, so welcome everybody. It's my role to introduce this event. I'm Sarah Hannam, I'm the Associate Dean for Strategy and Development in the Business School, and to welcome you all. Having spoken with Simon shortly before, he told me not to make a big fuss or to go into a lot of detail about him and who he is, but I'm going to ignore that advice completely and tell you a bit about Simon. On the basis there may be some people here that don't know everything about Simon, and it's important because he's going to be our speaker for today. But what I wanted to start by saying as well is that Simon's topic prompted me to look at the etymology of the word ambidextrous, just because I was curious to see where it comes from. And, you know, I'm really into language. And what I discovered was that it's from Latin, that ambi means on both sides and dexter means right-handed. So literally speaking, it means on both sides right-handed, which actually I'm hoping will give a nice intro, Simon, into, I think, the concept that you're going to be trying to talk about today. So that sounds really exciting. So a little bit about Simon. So Simon is one of our principal lecturers, and he provides leadership in the area of business and management, working very closely with programme leads and also with research area leads and the associate deans, including myself. Simon teaches across lots of different subject areas, including HRM, leadership, international business, marketing, and he's also interested in research methods and indeed in language. I know that Simon himself also has an interest in language, and he has previously been a programme director for lots of different sorts of courses, including DBAs and MBAs. He's had lots of experience working abroad in lots of different countries, including China, Brunei, Germany, Spain, Cyprus, and the Czech Republic. And he also is very active in his own research, which is in the area of HRM, leadership, international business, tourism and education. And he is particularly interested in organisational ambidexterity, which I guess is where the topic comes from. So without further ado, I'm delighted to hand over to Simon for his talk. Thank you very much, Simon. Over to you.
So I have I'm doing my classic student thing as the learning outcomes for the session today, is that and it will jump from place to place a little bit. It's how my brain works sometimes. So my brain goes off in the direction. I realise I put it later on in the presentation. So if it seems a bit scattered sometimes, it's because I just let my mind go with how things do. But generally, presenting paradoxical leadership examples within modern working, future issues and challenges, because I think it's so prominent in not just the working world, but the educational world as well, and therefore the future of leaders. And then using ambidexterity. So I put organizational ambidexterity. There's two versions I'm using. Got organizational ambidexterity as a general theoretical paradox lens, and I've got ambidextrous leadership as a secondary lens to kind of give it more scope and direction at the same time. And then I've put this one at the end, how to embrace paradoxical challenges, because the ultimate problem, if you like, based on anything I'm going to talk about that is paradoxical, is that if it truly is a paradox, then you can never overcome it. And everything is not going to be so negative in how I talk. It's going to be about creating solutions. And I word it as embracing the paradoxical challenges rather than solving the paradoxical challenges. And there's lots of reasoning and thought behind a lot of that as I move into it. So I made an abstract, and that's it. I won't read through the abstract. It's basically what I've just said before. But it's, to give it more official tone almost. And I realise my voice is already going because I've been talking all morning, conducting interviews. So yes, about me. So I'm going to say a little bit more about myself, some of the key connections to my journey, if you like, and do my little self-branding aspect in terms of being a director, co-director of one of the centres here at Oxbrookes University, being an associate editor for employee relations, and being a co-track chair at BAM for the special interest group Sustainable and Responsible Business. But I never used to be sustainable business. This is not where my education lies. My education lies in business and management, and then specialising in human resource management, which is not even leadership. And these are important facets to know. That organizational ambidexterity came past my PhD. I think I'd lost love of my PhD subject whilst I was doing it. Never mind when I finished it. Whilst I was doing it, I lost the passion for that area, and I didn't find the longevity in the subject area. Once ambidexterity came my way and it was presented in front of me, and this is somebody me and Lisa have known many years very well. This is Professor Peter Stokes, who's now at De Montfort University, who has actually taught me on my undergrad degree at Edge Hill. He was my manager at first at UCLan, and then he became my PhD supervisor because I asked him to join my team. And then he went to Chester, and then he suggested I should go to Chester. Then I went to Chester, and then I went to Winchester, and he went to De Montfort. And the rest is all history. And we've published many things together. He has been like a massive mentor for me through my career. But again, not the sustainable business aspect. That journey came at the University of Winchester. Being in a values-led university changed the makeup of who I am as an academic. So I was speaking to Beth at the start, so that's how I know Beth is from the University of Winchester. And having that sort of indulgence or sort of that introduction to the world of a values-based university is quite a different experience. And that has galvanized me to think, to sort of unlearn and smash everything I knew before and rebuild it into something new going forward. And like most people, I think I hit the brick wall when it comes to change and finding it almost impossible to change. And it's because of paradoxes that make it impossible to change. You know, why on earth are we not saving the planet now? What on earth has happened that we're doing so bad at saving the planet? So my emphasis is very much on tackling a number of complex issues at the same time. So I haven't even mentioned day-to-day leadership, which is one highly complicated role within a workplace. On top of that, sustainable and responsible business. On top of that, the world challenges that are going on, and so on, and so on, and so on. And I'm going to attempt to somehow sparkle light upon these things and come out at the other end, not feeling better about it, but maybe feeling more ready to have another go, another crack at sort of making some changes, because I've had to do that quite a few times in my career where I've had to kind of rethink what I'm doing. Now, it was fascinating that linked to conversations I've had this morning is that I'm very much a person who engages in so many different things, and very unforgivingly. I love diversity. I love doing different things. And that's where leadership comes in. So, you know, a lot of my research sits in human resource management, international business, leadership, and tourism, and other areas. And that's why I said it's the master, jack of all trades, master of none. It's kind of a possibility that is going on. But I just kind of enjoy doing these things. But the paradox lens fits all of them. But that's not where my journey is going to start here. We'll start with the sort of the academic institution that is higher education. And so I'm not going to read all these things out there. They're there to kind of look at, but I'll refer to some key aspects. So when I worked in my last university, which was a prime champion, which is the Principles of Responsible Management Education, which is a global sort of, well, as it says, it's a UN supported initiative to build and enhance sustainability in business schools, in particular, or management schools. And that's what helped me to galvanize. But in recent years, I've been quite critical of Prime. And I write a number of articles that highlights the shortcomings of what is happening with Prime. And I always have to write in these articles or things like this, that it's not because I hate Prime or anything like this. I just want them to do better. And I want change to be bigger. And I want it to be deeper. And I want people to realize that these complications are so difficult to fix that perhaps we need to rethink what we're kind of doing. So I'm a massive supporter of Prime because it's the best thing we have currently. So this hidden curriculum aspect, and it's that sort of fourth point down. No, not the fourth point. Reread. The third point down. Despite the efforts of Prime, there still remains this hidden curriculum regarding the domination of neoliberalistic, capitalistic virtues within higher education delivery. Long story short is that we're profit orientated, we're performance orientated, not saving the planet orientated, not sustainability orientated. And one of my, I think I've got it on a different slide, so I'm already doing it, I'm already jumping to a different slide, where a very recent paper that I had accepted in management learning relates to this idea: are we just irresponsible teaching sustainable and responsible business because society dictates that we are capitalistic and therefore we should educate students how to make money, profiteer, and make the best for themselves to survive in society? It's a fundamental argument to the whole of what I say, and it's it's a paradoxical situation for me, because I think we do both, whether we're conscious or unconscious about it. I think we still teach people how to profit, make money, and do these things, and then we kind of refer to values and we refer to ethics and we do stuff like this. But I could use words like it's tokenistic, it's sprinkled on top, it's not really doing very much. But the good news is that I have seen a lot of change in those generations that are coming through to become leaders. Thankfully, I've seen a lot of change in job titles. That's what LinkedIn's great for, by the way, is when you see where the alumni go and what jobs they do in the next kind of areas. And I've seen a lot of people, especially from my last institution, move into the third sector and do something that's more based, a contribution to society rather than how much money can I make in my career. So I've really seen shift, but the problem is major shift. It's not small change, it's the big changes. And the business school, it sits at the heart of it all for me before business, because we train those people to go out to business. And there's lots of papers, there's lots of critique around these kinds of things. And there's lots of pressure on things like sustainable development goals, which I'm heavily critical of again, but it's the best thing going. Again, I would say, is that it's great that we have something global that we can look at, but we are falling short on pretty much all of the targets because we're not making the level of change that we need. And a lot of this comes from a profit first mindset. It's very difficult to get away from. And it's because it's so complicated, whether you look at political factors, global factors, internationalization of business, different cultures, and so on and so on and so on, that making that change together becomes an incredibly difficult thing to do. Yes, and even then, as Blasco suggests, there's different systems in each university. Now, I'm quite lucky or unlucky to have worked in 5 UK universities with 5 very distinct cultures, and I've seen a lot of differences on how they engage with things like responsible management, or with sustainable business, or with things like inclusion and diversity and other really interesting things that are come up. I don't want to say the word fads, they're not fads, they're so important that we need to be doing them, but they perhaps don't get the energy and the sort of the output at the end that they require for the change to be made, which therefore means we have to be highly critically reflexive on our own institutions, on our own workplaces, on ourselves. And I use myself as a key example here. And in any teaching I do, and I've been teaching MBA fairly recently, and the first person I criticize is always myself. Am I doing enough to make the world a more sustainable place? And I think the answer is no, and I'm just being honest about it. I try hard at a lot of things, but I don't think I'm doing anywhere near enough. And I could argue that a lot of those reasons might be other factors that determine that going on. For example, having solar panels on your home. I've looked at it, went through it, and thought it's just not worth the money. I don't drive an electric car. I have no intention to do so in the near future. I drive the evil diesel, which is very sort of, it has a complicated conversation going with it, but there are reasons and factors that connect to this, and I could blame infrastructure, I could blame the government, but reality is it's me that makes these choices, I would argue. So being reflexive like that is so important to informing the decisions moving forward. So that's prime, principles of responsible management education, really trying to set an agenda, but perhaps falling short because of things like the hidden curriculum and the fact that we are dominated by forces that we either acknowledge consciously or unconsciously. They are there. Oh no, this table looks terrible now. Damn. Let's see if I can make it look better. There we go, make it look a little better. So this is a table from one of my papers, from that management learning paper that I referred to. And all I really want to do with this is highlight complexity, the depth of complexity and the annoyance almost of what a leader might do day to day. Because the leader is there at number 5, and I've used 2 fairly basic starter theories of transactional leadership versus transformational leadership, and I've put in there ethical leadership, authentic leadership, not even mentioning ambidextrous leadership, because that is to straddle both sides, as I will come to explain. But the leader sits at the heart because the leader is affected by all the different areas. So, for example, you've got, sorry, I'm just checking. I've had some nice bits in the chat, so I'll come back to that shortly. Is that structural ambidexterity? You don't really need to know, but it's things out of our control that are sort of the, how the business is structured, whether we have shareholders, whether we have stakeholders, whether we're profit orientated, values orientated, and all those other areas. Contextual is what a leader might be able to actually control on a day-to-day basis. And the sort of sequential ambidexterity gets into things like consumerism, cultural inertia, the learning organizer, and so on and so on. But all I really want to do with those 10 points, and these are just 10, like what's the phrase? A starter for 10, but these are 10 points. And they could be 100, they could be 1,000. They're just key ones that I think affect us all the time working in business, pretty much. And they refer to a lot of things we talk about when we're teaching in classes. Yeah. So, paradoxical thinking, the traditions and norms. So I kind of highlight this idea that, well, it's not unfortunate. I totally understand it, that we desire to find the ultimate answer in business, the easiest answer, the most black and white, the easiest way to make money or not, and therefore decisions become simpler. The more complicated it becomes, the harder it potentially is to make key decisions and affect the business in a positive way. And I make this argument that it could be quite linear, positivistic, obsessed with quantifying, and therefore quite limited. And there are loads of organizations that do this. I've put McDonald's, Amazon, IKEA today with you, but there are literally thousands upon thousands of organizations that lead with a simple, narrow focus, targeting this kind of simplicity in what they do. And it works really well and is highly profitable, and so on and so forth. I've come back to the cliche of what if knowledge is power? What if we could understand the complex nature of our realities and do something about it? So that brings me onto, so I mentioned these 2 theories, transformational leader, transactional leader. I'm only going to refer to these in parts for the leadership aspect. So the transformational leader is supposed to be the sort of the one that can instill aspects like pride and faith and respect and a sense of mission, whereas the transactional leader is more about efficiency, getting people to fulfill their contracts, and so on and so forth. And the building blocks, so these 2 leadership theories, I am heavily critical of when I teach, because I don't really like either of them, as you'll understand why as I get onto it. They don't recognize complexity enough. The theories are built on many grand assumptions, often male-dominated assumptions as well. It's very difficult to classify and measure leaders' performance. How do you measure pride? How do you measure faith? How do you measure charisma? How do you measure all these areas of leadership? But yet we still refer to elements like this and talk about them. And then on top of that, just for the complication, everything that happened during COVID-19 and beyond, the financial crash, 2007, 2008, the lessons that we learned or we did not learn from that. And obviously the war that is happening in the Ukraine and all the other huge life events that are going on. I might refer to cost of living crisis, and on all these other areas. It's a hot topic in our house too often. We don't like it, but we have to talk about it. So on to organizational ambidexterity. This is the theory, this is the lens, or the framework, depends how you want to call it. In essence, it's got two polar opposites, and the words are exploitative, explorative. And that was what the table represented. The one on the left-hand side was the exploitative side, the one on the right-hand side was the explorative side. I'll explain what each of those dimensions mean in a second. There's a lot of growing literature to suggest that we need to be ambidextrous. And when I say ambidextrous, that is looking at both. But of course, it might be disastrous to do both. Michael Porter's theories of the 1980s would certainly support that kind of stuck in the middle kind of perception. It's also argued that many organizations engage with ambidexterity, whether consciously or not. I would even take that a step further. We are ambidextrous, whether we're conscious or not, and that's absolutely fine. And then what about things like the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and how to achieve them? Because the way I'm going to use this theory is not the way the theory was designed. I've taken the theory from pretty much manufacturing and then applied it to different contexts because I think it's pliable enough to use. Not perfect, but pliable. So the exploitative side is this idea of focusing upon existing customers and markets. There are other related words like focusing on the known, efficiency, refinement. Hopefully you can see connections to McDonaldization, McDonald's, IKEA, Amazon, those types of organizations. And during the pandemic, I felt it, I saw it, many organizations went exploitative to save money, to survive the disaster that was going on, to hopefully get the business through to the other side and maybe change their tact of what to do afterwards. Not all of them did this. Some of them did nothing and failed. Some of them did something different and survived, but that's the other side of it. So this is McDonaldization in a nutshell. So you've got efficiency, calculability, predictability, and control. Hopefully these all reminisce of areas like McDonald's, these sort of, if you go through a drive-through, you don't have to pay sort of somebody to clean tables because you've taken the rubbish. Not only have you taken the need for a table away or the toilets, you've also taken your rubbish with you, which means there's less waste to deal with and so on. And you get very sort of controlled portion sizes and speed of service. Whether we think it's any good or not is questionable. It's highly standardized, so it's highly predictable. I am a victim of this as well. When I've been to Asia in particular, I find great comfort in westernized brands, McDonald's being one of them, mainly because I speak some German. I've been trying to learn a little Japanese, but I don't speak Mandarin or Cantonese, and I could never recognize the characters. That I had no confidence on my own on the streets of Shanghai, and therefore the predictability drew me in to those kind of areas, quite understandably. And control with the menus, they're fixed to how they want them to be. Workers have limited responsibility, therefore you can limit pay. It's easy to change staff. It's easier to get new staff because you won't have a skills deficit, and so on and so forth. Versus the explorative approaches, new knowledge, innovations, experimentation, flexibility, highly divergent thinking as opposed to convergent thinking, can make links to transformational leadership, and lots of literature does. I don't like this connection too much. Again, I'll come back to why. But lots of aspects like coaching, mentoring, this stuff that really engages employees a lot more. And some organizations did embrace more practice like this and experimented by converting their business to an online delivery or something like this and survived the process, and have perhaps changed forever, never to go back to some of the old practices. And actually, yes, whether they realize it or not, there's some ambidexterity going on. So this is the crux of the argument. What about doing it together? My main argument today is that there is a need to be ambidextrous. Sarah worded it as having the right hand as both hands. In other words, it's the strength of both sides, which is a great metaphor for it. That paradoxically in tandem is my own phrase that I've used. And it's that versus, but really convert it to and, exploitation and exploration, efficiency and flexibility, stability and adaptation, which again, if I wanted to be highly critical of myself, Michael Porter would say I perhaps get stuck in the middle, business fails, because the cost leaders and the differentiators will defeat me in the market. But there are many organizations doing it already. I always use Netflix as my super example because students love talking about Netflix because it's very easy to engage conversations about film, TV, and other areas like this. So it's kind of great in that kind of way. But the core arguments I make, so I don't work for Netflix. I can only go off hearsay in the press and so on and so forth. But here's what I do know, or what I did know. So I'll even go back in time with practice. Let's go back 10 years. Their subscription rate was one of the lowest of all the competitors. So they had the cost leadership element, but they don't need to be the lowest cost because they have the depth of product to offer at the other side of it. Not only do they offer a lot of film and TV that other people have created, they make their own, and that has expanded and grown significantly over time. But how do they keep the subscription rate so low? And that is classic globalization. Having subscriptions all over the world increases the amount of subscriptions you get. And therefore, I argue that Netflix is a highly ambidextrous organization. The limitation here, of course, is I've not even mentioned sustainable business or responsible management. That is just them succeeding as a capitalistic, profiteering organization. I struggle with the one to provide an example of the one that succeeds at all three. That kind of, it was almost a trichotomy effect. But I love to talk about Netflix. The problem is Netflix keep changing things and ruining it. For example, putting the prices up ruins the idea that they're a cost leader because other ones will be cheaper. Altering how they deliver what they do. So, for example, I'm sure many people have received the same email recently, like I have, that Netflix is starting to clamp down on sharing passwords. This cultural norm that has existed for a long time, they're now going to try and dismantle and break up, which I would argue ruins some of their ambidextrous approaches. Not that they would know it, but I sense it will. I think it will have a damaging long-term effect if they really do clamp down on it. So, ambidextrous leadership. So this is referring to something else that I've published as well. And the idea is ambidextrous leadership could help to assist in coping with the complexities of paradox. Now, I have all kinds of examples because I try to be an ambidextrous leader, and when I look at the participant list, and it's Omar is the key person, really. Right, Omar, you're the key person in the list. So fortunately or unfortunately, I line manage Omar, and whether he knows consciously or unconsciously, I try to practice what I preach on a very daily basis and engage with a lot of complexity. And to practice this over the years that I've been practicing it comes with a lot of toing and froing, not only in your reflective state in your mind, but also how you treat people. Let's give me the thumbs up. That's good. I'm taking that as a positive, Omar. I'm taking it as a positive.
It does.
Thanks. And the idea that I treat everybody as an individual, which means altering the style constantly to suit the situation. It's one that I've had to think about a lot because a standardized approach like transactional leadership perhaps comes with a lot less problems, but I think the ambidextrous leadership, not transformational, ambidextrous leadership approach, because I think transformational is still quite standardized. The ambidextrous approach, which might engage with both transactional, transformational, and a whole bunch of other leadership approaches, means that you can come across as quite contradicting. You can come across as quite two-faced. You can come across as all kinds of negative kind of things, perhaps even narcissistic, perhaps even quite psychopathic sometimes. There's lots of things that are going on, and I have to constantly reflect and think. That's very time consuming on a day-to-day basis, but I think it's crucial for success. I think it's crucial, whether you use cliche phrases like you can't please all of the people all of the time, and any phrases like that. I think it's a very similar kind of thing. Do you adjust your style to fit the situation? If a new COVID came along, I would adjust my style. If cost of living crisis is a major factor, which it is at the moment, it adjusts my style and how I talk and lead people. It has had a major effect. It adjusts how you empathize with people. It adjusts how you see the organization. It just does so much. And in this particular paper, and this paper was about resilience and ambidextrous leadership, and it was not about sort of the, leaders build natural resilience through crisis and so on and so forth, but ambidextrous leadership could help them to understand, cope with the sort of what has happened through that resilience building and turn it into something that is highly positive for the workforce that they are leading. And that's what a lot of that paper is about, is that comes at the end. The ambidextrous leadership is a conversion point at the end to understand sort of psychological resilience within leaders in particular. It offers a different way of thinking. It offers a crutch is the word I want to use, a support mechanism that it's okay to do things differently. So hopefully you can kind of see where I'm going. But let's get on to responsible leadership. I've put HRM in there as well because it's my background, and I think the two are intertwined. A lot of my job has HRM related focuses within there, foci. So similar to responsible management, responsible leadership does not have a very good definition. It remains an incredibly broad topic of debate. And just like solving the sustainable development goals or even talking about sustainability, it's a very complicated conversation. People's perceptions of what we should be doing versus what other people think we should be doing, it alters and it shifts all the time. It's why I start with myself, and why I start with my own weaknesses and compare them to other people and generate a discussion that kind of way. When I teach, when I talk to colleagues, people in or out of the university, in the family, with friends, whatever it might be. And in this broad conversation, it's about, I'm just thinking ethics, values, anything associated to sort of those kind of areas, the huge broad brush of responsible leadership. But we need it, and that's what the argument is there. The third point is about we need it because the environment is sort of degrading. We've got a destruction of indigenous habitats, poor working conditions and wages. Dare I refer to the constant strike actions that have been going on across multiple industries. And you can see there is an element of crisis. So maybe responsible leadership, nobody really talks about it in the press and the news and things like this, but it's what I think of when I see these things happening, is that we need more responsible leadership across the board, on top of the as part of ambidextrous leadership. And so I've referred to this as a trichotomy effect. There are three polar opposites to contend with here, which is a limitation of the theory, by the way, of exploitative versus explorative. And there's a third dimension. The problem is solving the third dimension is not really a third point. It goes into both, and it overlaps with the two together, because you can drive sustainable development through efficiency. You can drive it through innovation. So when I make that model, I can picture it successfully. You'll be able to see it, but it hasn't happened yet. And it's been a fair few years. So for examining the paradox, the implementation and delivery of responsible management education, hidden curriculum, back to prime, that I believe they're paradoxical and will remain paradoxical probably way beyond my lifetime and a lot longer, if not forever. I just don't see capitalism changing anytime soon, not without a massive world event for that to happen, but that might mean a collapse of society. Thinking about all these doom and gloom films that I watch, but I just think it's, we like it so much. I don't think we'll change it enough for it not to be called capitalism anymore, for many, many different kinds of reasons. And then within this, we attempt to be leaders in organisations. I feel very sorry for the new leaders coming into the world of work. It was different for me when I started. It was all very internalised. It was about making money, and if there were problems, it was about the organisation surviving. And they were very two fairly localised things to think about. Happiness of staff, nah, not really an interest at the beginning, but it's become so much bigger in the last 20 plus years. And it has become more about whether it's aspects like well-being, whether it's work-life balance, which are very common phrases these days and have been around for a long time, whether it is sustainable development, saving the planet, whether it is dealing with sort of those personal crises around things like cost of living, and so on and so forth, whether it is focusing on career and contributing something as a legacy to community rather than just being a slave horse to an organization. It's very much more complicated as a leader. My conversations with people are very different to what they were. The difference is I'm not afraid to have them now. I would have been 20 years ago, very afraid to have those conversations. My application of ambidexterity is not a normal one. It is not how most people use ambidexterity. I'm hoping it's going to build most of my career, frankly, but we'll see how that goes. But that's what I'm hoping. But it's because I enjoy the connections as well. I think it's got potential to make change through that application. It's a complicated juxtaposition, and the sustainability paradox could be argued to be absolutely insurmountable, and we will never solve that problem. And therefore, we are just a ticking time bomb towards the end and the destruction of the planet. But doesn't stop me fighting for change. But we need change. It should start in management education and leadership practices. I have a few projects on the go where I'm trying to attempt to make a link and to give you a clue as to one of them. I'm trying to think who's in the course. So no, I don't think anybody would know about this one. No, I don't think they are. Looking for a particular name. No, they're not here. That's good. So I can ruin it all I want. So one of these ideas is to kind of train and develop students that go on work placements into becoming advocates, supporters of sustainable development change within the organizations they go work for a year, but being the leader of it from such a young age. I have found the development package to make, the training package, but I don't have the money to do it. I'm trying to get the money externally to bring it in, to make that package, to train those future leaders, push them into their work placements, and have that echo effect into organizations from the bottom up. Most people would argue you have to convince the leader at the top to make change for an organization going down. Whereas I believe if they're not going to change, they're not going to change. But you can be integrated with the backing of the university, the backing of values, the backing of prime, the backing of SDGs. I think can create more power from the beginning, because those students going into their placements have the backing of the university. If I can create a program that is related to projects related to that, I think they'll have more value. And I'm back to being ambidextrous. I think it can make change, but I think it'd be great for their career development. I think it'd be great for them getting promotion and becoming better leaders in the organizations. Everything I'm creating is not single-minded, or what I might call sort of the Greta Thunberg effect, where I try to guilt people into making change forever. It's not, it's embracing both sides, that people get something out of it, but the ultimate effect is massive change for sustainable development, which I think is possible. We can be a part of this problem as academics, but we should be a part of the solution, and the same is for organizations. So I just highlight this one here, just looking at the time. I won't waffle on too much longer. I'm very thanks for your patience of listening to somebody waffle on about this stuff. But when thinking about applying ambidexterity, there are so many different things you can apply it to. The key in this list is not the positive ones, it's the negative ones. Because, you know, being a wonderful leader, charismatic, inspiring people, inspirational, that stuff is quite natural. Dealing with that at the same time as other things that are on that list is a very different style of leadership proposition. And, you know, trust, ethics, responsible management, toxic leadership, downsize, economic downturn, anything else there has the potential for major negativity in organizations. I put ethics as a major negativity because if you don't have values, you're not going to build the ethics. Trust is often destroyed in organizations very quickly with one action. Responsible management might be absent. I've referred to possibilities why. We have a lot of toxic leaders in organizations, but we still have to manage them and we have to work with them. We have to find a way. Downsizing is a part of efficiency, economic downturn. There comes a choice of whether to be exploitative or explorative. COVID-19, the massive crisis that nobody expected, but we still have to deal with it. And of course, threats to civilization. So what does this mean for leadership approaches? If you are listening to this conversation, it's food for thought. It's tradition versus modern, but I would add versus alternative. I'm classifying this as alternative. Attempting to embrace the paradox, not easy. There are a lot of related issues. What does the reality look like for leaders when we're consumed by day-to-day activities, different contexts, and so on? Where do we go next from here? I mentioned my example of training the next generation of leaders as one possible angle, but I'm constantly thinking about things to do. And will we ever actually get there? I don't know. I've put potential methods because these are ones I'm involved in that are quite innovative and unique. CPAR, by the way, is critical participatory action research. Can't even say it properly. Such a mouthful. And then these are in the literature, these are already developed ways of doing ambidexterity. The mixed leadership style where you might have two types of leaders. So you hire an exploitative one and an explorative one. They don't have to have that effect of coming across as contradicting and all of that. You just have two styles of leader to do two types of things. And you can have that kind of mixed leader approach, which is what I'm attempting to do, where a balance between various different leadership styles and different areas, different styles. The classic being marketing requires an explorative style because it's a creative part. Finance might be more exploitative because it's related to money, saving money. They're very sweeping generalizations, by the way. Please don't destroy me for such criticisms. And then my final concluding thoughts, we're still facing one of the greatest world challenges, not just on a business level, but the personal level is key because I have these thoughts at home as well. Normative approaches, I argue, are failing us. We need a greater diversity of thinking. Education, I think, is crucial, but I would say that I work in education. Being a leader is hard, full stop. I say it to students all the time. The reason you get paid more is because it's a hard job, and I will never undermine that. It is a difficult job enough on multiple levels to then add on a load more on top. And then I put my little disclaimer. Please don't take into consideration that please do take into consideration that my perspectives are heavily dictated by my UK context and experiences. I have ethnocentric tendencies and I accept them. I'm skewed by my experiences. I'm skewed. So educated within capitalistic dominated institutions, I was trained to profiteer, not trained in sustainable development. My gender experiences, I'm a white male, and I think it's profoundly different experiences to whether it's female or people from different ethnic backgrounds. My international experiences have informed me very differently, parts of Asia, lots of parts of Europe, and so on, and so on, and so on. So it's a very, it comes from a very particular angle, but hopefully still interesting. And that's me done. I will stop talking. I think that is long enough.